Welcome to the Seriously podcast. I'm your host, Annaliese Gann. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the Seriously podcast, where we make light of serious conversations with really interesting people. Tazz Ally is an influencer, makeup and hair artist, and mum of 5 from Perth. With an aesthetic Instagram and a constant flow of brand deals, one would deem Tazz's life to be perfect. However, there is so much more to her story, because her story, well, it's one of bravery, healing, and mainly survival. I'll let Tazz do the rest of the talking. She has a lot to mention and talk about today, and she is such a huge inspiration, and I'm very grateful that she came on and shared her story. So here she is, the incredible Tazz Ally. Tazz Ally, welcome to Seriously.
Thank you very much for having me today.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good. Now, you're an influencer, mum blogger, and you have been since 2016. How would you describe your socials?
I think my socials have really evolved with different parts of my life. I started off my social media with content creation, very passionate about photography. And then as my life changed, I became more comfortable with giving more parts of myself and kind of putting a face behind the page and the brand. I kind of moved into fashion, and then I moved into mumhood. So it really has evolved with, certain parts of my life and where I am. And then currently I'm kind of embarked on my fitness journey, and it aligns with mental health. So that's where I'm kind of moving now. And yeah, life after 40, I suppose, is where I can kind of focus now when it comes to my social media. Yeah.
That's amazing. I feel like that's a very niche market as well. You have been very open in the past on social media of your story and certain areas of your childhood where you have healed now as an adult. Would you be comfortable with sharing more about your story and your trauma story?
Yeah, I actually would be very comfortable because, apart from me sharing that story on social media, I've actually never had an opportunity to talk about it and actually be heard. You can read something on social media, but when you actually hear someone, I think there's more of a connection and there's more feeling behind that. I decided to share my childhood trauma and sexual abuse on social media after I had actually experienced trauma as an adult. For years and years and years, I kind of minimalized the sexual abuse and childhood trauma in my head, thinking that I could just go on with my life and continue to do things, and it was never going to affect me. And I think I did that really well. I actually was able to suppress that really, really well and kind of put it to the back of my head and go, right, it's never going to surface again. But when I did go through my last pregnancy and my birth was really traumatic, the trauma from that had left me feeling so victimized, which is, again, very similar to being a victim of sexual abuse. And I'm not saying that sexual abuse or child abuse is the exact same thing as, medical procedures, because it was my emergency Caesar that led to my trauma. But it's who you become in those moments that are similar. And I had no idea that after I'd come through, the birth and, I'd gotten home and, of course, the postnatal depression started to hit me, I'd never ever actually felt the heaviness of it. And then I realized that there was so much more that was contributing to my mental state of mind. And, I started to actually remember heaps of things from my childhood. And it was quite overwhelming because besides me feeling the postnatal depression from, just the normal process of after you give birth, I now had this added emotions and feelings from my childhood. And I still had to be present for twins and 3 other kids. So the first 18 months of having the twins and our family becoming a family of 7, it was probably the hardest for me. And I started to remember things of my childhood, and I started to get really angry, and I was lashing out, and I I remember calling my family and kind of lashing out at them, and I was angry because I couldn't understand how I could love my kids so much and I would protect them so fiercely. I was angry for little me. I would kind of go back into my head and I wanted to be my own mother. I wanted to be Tazz's mother, this, little Tazz's mother. I wanted to put my arms around her and say, I'm going to protect you and I'm going to be there for you. And that was the biggest struggle for me. I wasn't having, flashbacks or trauma surfacing because I was like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. I was having it as a mother today going, what could I have done for her? I felt guilty that I couldn't be a mother to myself. It's such a weird idea and, thing that I went through, but I literally just wanted to protect her. I wanted to protect that little child. As time went by, obviously, I started to really question a lot of aspects about my life, and obviously I started to approach people about it in my family. And their responses were not what I expected it to be. And it was almost as though I was made to feel like I was looking for attention. And, in my head I kept thinking, I'm 38 years old. Why would I be looking for attention in that area? Like, that would be quite strange. Then I'd really have to step back and go, there's something drastically wrong with you. I was never received well, talking about it. It was always a thing of it was embarrassing for my family to have to hear about it. And because I'd put it on social media, oh my gosh, that was massive. It was like, oh my gosh, you've just exposed our entire family. Well, no, it's not about you, it's about me. I'm the one that actually went through that. You're just a bystander, So I was angry with the responses, and I was angry with, why am I not being heard? I wasn't heard as a child, and I'm not being heard as an adult. So when do you actually start feeling supported in your trauma? As time went by, I started to feel quite unstable within myself because I tapped in so much to the childhood trauma that I started to question whether or not did I bring it upon myself. There was nobody to answer those questions. There was nobody there to explain to me why I was left alone. Why was it okay to be left alone with this person? I would never leave my kids alone with anyone. Maybe my experiences have made me that person that I am today, but I just don't take for granted that my kids are safe with anyone. I always make sure. I don't know. Everything that I am today kind of made me question everything that they were then to me.
Can I ask, if it's not too personal, your abuser, were they known to your family?
Absolutely. He was a family friend.
Wow.
Yeah. For many years.
Oh, my God.
Many, many years. And even after I had kids and I got married, I would still have to see him at family functions. Yeah. And I was never brave enough to talk about it because I just wanted it to disappear. I wanted it to not exist in my head. I wanted to pretend my whole life that it never actually happened. And, like I say, it came up and I didn't actually prompt it. I didn't go, I think I'm going to go back and, kind of tap into that again and I'm going to work through this. I didn't do that. It was completely out of my control. Yeah.
I think as well, when you talk about your family not acknowledging and not confirming that, yes, this did happen, this is why victims don't come forward, because people gaslight or they don't acknowledge your pain or your hurt or say, yes, it actually did happen. And I just want to say, obviously you know this, but yeah, it's when you get abused, it's not your fucking fault.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who's going through their own story or their own journey, victims, the onus always falls on the victim. Like, why didn't you do this? But it's usually 100% of the time, it's because the abuser is an abusive person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why people don't come forward.
That's right. And, when I did share my story, I had gotten so many people message me And it
Really?
was, I'm actually getting goosebumps. It was actually so unnerving that people that I would have known for years and years and years, and I would be like, oh, I would never have thought that they would have gone to that.
Really? So they reached out with their own personal story.
That's correct.
Wow.
And it's amazing how I'd say 90% of them would have started. I was never really brave enough to share my story, but thank you for sharing yours. And I think that is, it's massive for them to have felt comfortable to share that with me, because even though that they feel like they've not shared their story, they actually have. They've shared it with me. So that's a starting point for them. And it was hard for me to read because, you don't want to know that somebody else is feeling those heavy, emotions and trauma. But at the same time, you kind of go, these are people that I can relate to and I can talk to. And if should I have a down moment, I can reach out and go, this is what I'm feeling. Did you feel this? Because a lot of the time, the emotions that you feel around sexual abuse and child abuse, you often think that it's just you that feels that way. But I've actually found it easier to actually approach people and go, this is what I'm feeling, and I feel really weird feeling this way, and it's just me. And then they go, absolutely not. I actually feel the exact same way. So it kind of makes you understand and process that trauma a little bit better. I do follow a lot of women that have gone through sexual abuse, and their stories, really, really encourage me. And I actually chat to some of them. There's one particular lady in the States that I've chatted to quite often. Her story is incredible, and it's so relatable. And one of the things that I was feeling, I felt so disgusting feeling it, that I reached out to her and I asked her, is this normal? And she was like, absolutely. I felt like that my whole life. And I was like, wow, oh my gosh, like that's insane. Like you honestly feel so alone in how you're processing things, and the questions you ask yourself, you actually start interrogating yourself. Why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? And why didn't you speak up? And you don't have to answer those questions because you are the person. You can't, it becomes so difficult to navigate. Yeah.
And so you were saying as a mother, like your perspective has been like, I want to protect my kids, obviously, like as a normal parent would think. Do you ever feel angry and like upset that no one had that, perspective for your own safety? Like, do you think it was a different time back then, or do you just think there wasn't enough care? Like,
I do. I definitely do feel like I wasn't important enough. That's the crux of it. Was you sit back and you go, was I not that valued? Was I not important? And that's probably the hardest part to deal with, especially being a parent today. I feel like because it was such a long time ago and things were so different back then, I feel like people didn't want to, it was taboo. It was a reflection on an entire family, not just one person. And that's the sad reality of 40 years ago was, it was just not something that families wanted to tackle and, approach. And I don't think they had the capacity or, the mental or, I don't know, emotional capacity to...
Or intelligence, yeah.
Intelligence as well, to be able to embrace or approach that and deal with it, I think a lot of people would be sitting here, a lot less heavy if they had people come forward and go, do you know what? I'm going to protect you.
And as you said before, like when you approached your family about it initially and they said, oh, you're bringing shame upon our family, which makes me fucking so angry.
Yeah.
Do you think, in your perspective, is that a cultural thing? Like, because I feel like it may be tackled a bit differently I'm not saying in every family, but I feel like, is that common in South Africa?
I actually don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know enough people that have gone through it to, on a personal level, to know that it's a South African thing. I don't think that there is particular, background attached to how people respond
Yeah.
to things. I think it comes down to the emotional intelligence of an individual and the emotional capacity and strength of individuals to be able to tackle that. And I think that a lot of families choose not to. In saying that, during the time of me coming out and talking about it, and yes, my family was really triggered by it. And it was, I think the trigger from my family was because they didn't do something about it, and because of their lack of presence in my life. That's what was more of a trigger rather than, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. It was shame as an individual. That's what I feel, and that's how I see it. Yeah.
Hey guys, if you've loved listening to the Seriously podcast, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify podcasts. It keeps us making incredible content for all of you to hear. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for sharing and being so honest. Like, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to hear this and be like, oh my God, like I've had a similar experience. And like, no one does talk about it. It's hard. It's painful.
Yeah.
When we refer to your healing journey, how has healing been for you? Like, obviously it's not lateral, it's up and down.
Yeah.
Like, when do you think your healing journey started?
Wow. My healing journey started last year on the 17th of January when I lost my grandfather.
Wow.
My grandfather was the man that raised me, and he was a very important part of my life. He passed away, and prior to that, obviously I hadn't spoken to my dad for a couple of years. He was pretty much non-existent in my life. And I got a call that morning to say my grandfather passed away, and I felt the need to call my dad and just go, look, I'm really sorry that you lost your dad. But I was so overwhelmed with emotion, and I can't tell you what triggered that, but I felt like I needed to just let go, because my grandfather, for a lot of months, a lot of months prior to him passing away, he really begged me to heal, and he really asked me to mend relationships. And I just felt like he was asking me to do that just because it was easier. It was like the easy way out. And I was like, it's not that simple. But the day I called my dad, I feel like that moment was such a huge moment for myself. I chose to embark on that healing journey while I was mourning my grandfather, because I needed to free myself of the heaviness that I felt towards people that were not present for me and that did not protect me from the abuse, in order for me to actually tackle the abuse. There were so many layers before I could actually deal with the abuse. I had to unpack so much. There were so many people that I was angry with. And after I got through my anger with so many different people, by the time I was dealing with what had actually happened, I was exhausted. And I realized in that moment that in order for me to be able to really deal with my sexual abuse and my healing, I needed to heal and let go of the unhealthy relationships, or I shouldn't say unhealthy relationships, but I needed to let go of the anger that I had towards people. I needed to let that go, and my dad being one of them. Since I've done that, my dad and I have actually never had a conversation about what had happened, because I felt like it was easier for me to just say to him, I just need to hear an apology from you. That was all I actually needed, was my dad to say, I'm sorry. And believe it or not, but that was enough for me, because that was just a fraction of what I had to deal with.
Has he apologised?
He has, yeah. And my relationship with him is absolutely incredible. And that's helped me heal. That's helped me on my healing journey. We all need our parents, right? And I always wanted my dad. I always wanted that father figure. And now I have him in my life. And it makes me feel like I am able to take anything on. And, I have that person in my corner now. So, you know, now I can deal with the abuse, and there's no other layers that are kind of making me feel tedious, you know, mentally before I actually get to the real nitty-gritty of the abuse, because I still have to do that. I haven't even gotten to that point yet.
Oh, okay.
My healing journey is healing things around the sexual abuse. And I'm hoping that as time goes by and as I'm not comfortable with kind of getting down to that point just yet. I need to get to that point still where I have to unpack, and I'm not ready to unpack yet. But I am ready to talk about it, and I'm ready to, because talking about it helps me. It helps me become more confident in being able to unpack that eventually.
Good on you. And talking about it is the first step.
Yeah.
In terms of talking about it, have you embarked on a therapy journey, or have you thought about talking to someone externally? Is that where you're at the moment, or what's your thoughts?
I actually did start speaking to someone, but unfortunately, I do struggle to maintain those relationships and to maintain that bond, because you really have to have a bond with your therapist, right?
You do. It's hard to find.
Yeah, it is very hard to find. And I always felt like because I was not healed on the surface,
Yeah.
I felt like I was being psychoanalyzed. So I'd get angry in sessions and I'd be like,
Yeah.
can you stop? You're trying to get into my head. And that's what they meant to be doing. But I felt like, no, I felt like you're violating me. Stop. So I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm ready to. Unpacking sexual abuse is a huge thing. You know, you've got to go back and you've got to actually work through every single aspect of it. And, you know, in order to heal, you've got to understand. And I'm not ready to understand. I don't think I'm mentally ready to really tackle it. And that's what psychologists do, is that they kind of tap into that. And I got scared, and I was like, I can't do this. And another aspect of it is that I'm mentally drained. When I was doing those sessions, I was so exhausted that by the time I came out of it, I'd have to have a nap.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have a nap. I have 5 kids. So unfortunately, dealing with sexual abuse and dealing with trauma is really hard when you're a mother, because you need to find the time to actually process things.
And mourn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how do you find that balance? And that's where I struggle, is I've put my childhood abuse on hold to be a mother, because I don't want anything to interfere with that. But putting that on hold, it does manifest in the way I become a mother. There's things that contribute to different aspects of motherhood. So it's really tricky and it's so complicated. And I acknowledge it. You know, I'm not hiding behind it. I acknowledge it. I know I need to start therapy. I definitely do need to start that. But I'm just not ready. I really am not ready. Yeah.
That is relatable though, because I feel like a lot of people go, oh, I'm doing therapy. I've also had that experience where I was like, the psychologist triggered me so much I didn't go back because they were highlighting things. It was too hard to deal with at that time. I had too much on. I literally couldn't cope.
Yeah.
So you're right. You need space. Totally get it. So in 2024, how are you doing? After all of this trauma and all of this healing and all of these things that you've had to deal with over your life, how are you feeling now in 2024?
I actually feel so much more lighter. I actually feel like I'm so much more aware of what's good for me. I'm more sensitive to being in peaceful moments. You know, I'm sensitive to not allowing anything that's not significant to kind of disrupt my peace, really. Me being able to heal relationships that surrounded my sexual abuse was so freeing for me. It was so freeing for me. And it was such a huge weight off my shoulders. And, you know, it all kind of started with my grandfather passing, you know.
Wow.
And I will always be thankful to him for never giving up on me and always pushing me in the right direction. And I feel like I always live with the regret that I never did it before he passed on, to be able to see that peace. So 2024 for me is definitely a year that I want to focus on the positivity of my life, and eventually move into the area of tackling the more difficult things as, you know, my kids get older and, you know, I'm not as hands-on with the twins. They start daycare. So, you know, that really helps me now. So, yeah, a lot of things have changed for 2024, and I think it's going to be positive moving forward, especially for my personal life. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for you, and it seems like a very positive start to the year.
Yeah.
And your aura is very light.
Oh, thank
Like
you.
I remember meeting you at an event, I think 2 years ago, and even since then I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like you're like happy.
Yep.
I don't know.
I actually have had a few people saying that.
Oh, really?
They feel like something massive shifted in the last
Yeah.
year. And, you know, when you desperately want specific relationships, peace, you know, when you find that, you will find that peace. And I feel like my dad is a huge contributor to that peace.
Wow.
Yeah, he has been. He was a huge, you know, part of my pain, but he was also a huge part of my healing.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And I can't thank him enough for allowing that to happen as well. Yeah.
Tazz, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram, Tazz Ally on Instagram, and that's about it.
Thank you so much for coming on Seriously. And by the way,
Thank
follow
you.
her. She has an amazing Instagram, so aesthetically
thank you.
pleasing.
Thank you.
I'm like, you're my inspo. I wish
am
I could.
OCD when it comes to that.
No, because I'm like, how do you do it? Like, I'm not as like creative, and like, I just love your aesthetic. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Thanks, guys, for tuning in this week to Seriously. We'll catch you next week for another guest. Bye.